live.
Good morning, everybody, and you are very welcome to this morning's Subcommittee licensing hearing, Wednesday, the 1st of February 2023. My first task as the chairman of the licensing committee and as deemed to be the presiding person for the purposes of today's meeting is to ask for nomination for chair for subcommittee. May I have a nomination, please?
Chair, this is Councillor Johnson. I'm happy to nominate you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. And may I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Farquhar, more than happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. So duly elected, I will pass to our clerk, Mrs. Hollyoak, who will take us through housekeeping, please. Thank you, Mrs. Hollyoak.
Thank you, Chair. Please note this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. To ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chair. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please ensure that you unmute yourself and always turn on the video function before speaking. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. After each party has made their representation, the Chair will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand function at the top right of the screen. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent or turned off for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hollyoak. So we have no apologies for today. We are all in train. Just like to thank Councillor Farr and also Councillor Kelsey, who was here earlier, for attending as substitutes, but you won't be needed, so you're free to go. You can, of course, stay to observe if you so wish, but thank you so much for your attendance this morning. So moving on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Could I please ask, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Johnson?
Just one for transparency, Chair. I did sit on the item for this application for planning when the application was made for the change of use. But it doesn't affect my judgment today in any way.
They're not coterminous in that way, so you're absolutely fine. But thank you so much for your transparency. And Councillor Farquhar.
None, thank you, Chair.
Okay, and for completeness, I have no declarations of interest either. So moving on then to item 4, which is the protocol for public speaking. This has been circulated. It's a revised protocol and you should have had the papers with regard to this, but I will take us through verbally so that we all understand the process. So moving to our substantive, which is item 5, application for a premises licence at McDonald's, Barrack Road, Christchurch, BH232AW. McDonald's Restaurant Limited have made an application for a premises licence to allow the provision of late night refreshment from 2300 hours to 500 hours, Monday to Sunday. The matter is brought before the Licensing Subcommittee for determination. So I will now ask, please, if those present would like to explain who they are and their ward. I'll start with myself. I'm Councillor Jude Butt. I'm chair of the Licensing Committee. I'm chair of this subcommittee for the purposes of today's business, and my ward is Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Councillor Farquhar.
Councillor George Farquhar, and I'm a subcommittee member today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farquhar. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Toby Johnson, ward member for Alderney and Bourne Valley and vice chair of the Licensing Committee.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Sharon Ambides, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Ma'am, yes, good morning. I'm the barrister representing McDonald's. I have with me Elaine Rayner, who is the representative from Shoesmiths, McDonald's firm of solicitors, and I have Mark Gallant, whose role is licensing, security, and so on, which is a national role. I suspect I would be doing most of the talking today, unless Mark has anything to add.
Indeed,
thank you.
As the applicant's representative, of course. Well, Mr. Gallant, Mrs. Rayner, you've lost your shot, I'm afraid. You've already been introduced, but just if you could just say good morning, just so that we know that mics are working. Mr. Gallant.
Good morning.
Is your mic okay? And Mrs. Rayner.
Good morning.
Lovely. Okay, so you're all present and correct. Our objector is not attending, so we won't be hearing from them. Mrs. Rogers.
Yes, hello, good morning. Sarah Rogers, Senior Licensing Officer, BCP Council. I'm covering for the case officer as she's not able to come today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rogers. Most grateful. And Mrs. McNamara?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Joanne McNamara and I'm the legal advisor to the subcommittee today.
And we've already heard from our clerk, Mrs. Holyoke, but please introduce yourself, Mrs. Holyoke.
Thank you. Jill Holyoke, clerk to the subcommittee today.
Thank you. Jill's staying off without the video on because she's got a lot to do in the background, so she doesn't need to be on video. So just to check then that everybody who's given notice of their intention to speak has been identified, and that anyone who wishes to withdraw representation or doesn't wish to speak can now show their hand. I see nobody showing, so we're all content. So item 7 is the procedure and order of speaking, and it is as follows. The licensing officer will present their report, and then our applicant will make their application. There'll be questions of the applicant by all parties, and members of the subcommittee will take first. The responsible authorities or other persons will then make representations, but we have none of those present, so I will be reading out the submission from the one objector so that it is heard as a public record. And then there'll be questions of the responsible authority and other persons, which will be very difficult, but we will try and tease out with advice from our legal advisor if we have any legal issues from the objector's submission. It's always very hard when the objector isn't present for the subcommittee. And then all parties will be given an opportunity to sum up. The party who spoke first, last will go first, and then I'll then conclude the hearing. And the subcommittee will deliberate in private with our legal advisor and our clerk, and notification subcommittee decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with our regulations, which is today, Wednesday, the 1st of February. And the notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, and I will ask at the time our legal advisor if she will explain that right of appeal. So I just want all parties then to confirm that they're happy with that process. So Mr. Sharon-Bedes, are you happy? Are you so content?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gallant? Are you content?
Yes, I'm content, thank you.
Okay. And Mrs. Rayner, are you content?
Yes, I'm content, thank you.
And Mrs. Rogers, are you content?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. McNamara?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. So finally, just to remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they've already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. And all questions, please, must be asked through the chair. No cross-examination of parties, which would probably be difficult as we have no objector, but it needs to be stated thus. So item 9, I will now ask our licensing officer please to present her case. Mrs. Rogers, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. As we heard, this is an application for a premises licence to permit late night refreshment only until 5 AM each day of the week. As a result of the consultation, one representation was received from another person on the grounds that to grant the application would undermine the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. No representations were received from any of the responsible authorities. As always, should this application be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with the licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any of the responsible authorities or any other person may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So, members, are there any questions on points of fact with regard to the submission and the report? Councillor Farquhar?
Thank you, Chair. None on point of fact.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson?
Yes, Chair, just one out of slight curiosity, knowing the site as I do. Mrs. Rogers, do you know what the licence was for the preceding restaurant, the previous licence holder, a licence to early morning?
I don't know that. I can check for you.
It's quite all right. It's not a big thing. I was just wondering if you had that information to hand. Thank you.
Would be useful if you were able to check that and perhaps advise us. It may throw maybe of some assistance. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Johnson, for raising that. So, Mr. Sharon-Bedes, do you have any questions on points of fact for Mrs. Rogers?
None. Thank you very much. None. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on then, we move on to our applicant. It's your opportunity to put forward your applications. So, Mr. Sharon-Bedes, you have the floor.
Ma'am, thank you very much. Sorry, excuse me. I very helpfully have Mark Gallant on WhatsApp so he can give me answers to your questions if it's needed. So, Ma'am, thank you very much. This is a straightforward application that comes on the back of a planning permission. As you're aware, you must have regard to the Section 182 guidance when making your decision. And the Section 182 guidance at paragraphs 14.64 and 14.65 tell you that there should be proper integration between the licensing committees and indeed the planning committees. That's not to say that you must make the same decision, but there's a sense that there must consistency in your decision making. And as your colleague that sits on planning will tell you, the planning remit is far wider than the licensing remit, because planning considers amenity, far wider amenity than the licensing objectives. So when the local residents in their bullet points talk about the extended hours and having an impact on the residential premises, the impact of antisocial behaviour, traffic, night customers and so on, when they talk about the environmental impacts and the opening hours on the general character, these general submissions and concerns have already been addressed by your planning authority, by yourselves. And in effect, you have said, yes, we want to demolish this existing building, we want to replace it with something new and modern, and we want to replace it with a building that is designed for 24-hour quick service restaurant, including takeaway and drive-through. So now what we are doing is we are looking at the operational features of that particular premises. Now, you will see from the representation, which is on page 33, that there are no criticisms of our operational measures. They have been set out in the operating schedule. The operating schedule is at pages 22 and 23, which deals with everything you would expect, from CCTV to staff training to litter picks and so on. And I won't go into those, but I will leave it for you and your colleagues to ask me any questions on those. This application is also significant in that there are no representations by your responsible authorities. As you know, your responsible authorities are the experts in their respective fields, so environmental health, nuisance, crime and disorder, and so on. And it is expected that if there are those concerns, they will actively engage with those, and they will make representations as appropriate. That is paragraph 9.12 of the Section 182 guidance. The way in which McDonald's operates is that either they will operate the stores themselves, or they will operate through a franchisee. In the present circumstances, once the license is granted, if it is granted, it is transferred to a franchisee. Franchisee is Tony Bennett. He operates a firm called Bennett Restaurants Limited. He has been a franchisee for 24 years. He operates some 18 restaurants, of which 18 are licensed, of which 8 are licensed beyond 11 o'clock in the evening, and of which 4 are 24 hours. He operates within the community, as many of the franchisees do, sponsoring various events, including litter picks. I suspect we'll be talking about litter picks in some detail, because it's on these hearings. So, ma'am, for practical purposes and indeed for legal purposes, you don't have a representation which directly relates to the licensing objectives. You have a planning objection. You have no criticism of the operating schedule. You have no responsible authorities making any representations against you or informing your position, on the basis that this is a reputable firm a nationally experienced firm, a reputable franchisee with a good history and no complaints. I'm going to commend this application to you, and I don't propose to say anything more. Rather, I shall make myself available to answer any questions that you and your colleagues may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharon-Lambides. Of course, you have 3 planning members who are also licensing members here today, so we're perfectly aware of the Section 183 9.2 issue and that guidance and everything that sits behind it. We also are averse with looking at each license on its own and on its merits. So obviously, everything you say about planning is absolutely correct, but we still need to ensure to interrogate down and to investigate that all the matters raised by this member of the public, be they right, wrong or indifferent, are indeed answered to our satisfaction if we were so disposed to grant. So just to be clear on that. So with that said, it's now opportunity for members to ask questions of you. So I will open the floor and I will start. Councillor Johnson, any questions for Mr. Sharon-Lambides, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding those litter picking issues, obviously that is a major talking point, especially around this area. It was a problem with the preceding restaurant. Could you just go into a little bit more clarity, as you said you had that prepared? So I'd quite like to hear that. Thank you.
Absolutely. So McDonald's has always recognised that litter is an issue, not just its own litter, but in the quick service industry, people do throw litter, and it is incredibly annoying. It has worked since the 80s with the Department of the Environment in order to promote the reduction in litter. What the stores do, and what this franchisee does, is that there is always a litter pick. So typically what happens is that the first litter pick happens on a 24-hour side, if it's granted, will start at sunrise, and the last litter pick tends to happen at sunset. The reason for the sunset clause is that it's a health and safety and insurance issue, and so there won't be litter picks at night, though there are within our surrounding curtilage. So during the day, they will be operating at regular interviews. A licensing officer can go into any one of our stores and they will see that there is a map and there is a rota. That person will develop a route which will become the standard route where they will follow. That route will be adjusted because for whatever reason, a particular area might attract some litter. And so within, certainly beyond the curtilage, but within the easy walking distance of its local area, and McDonald's will have litter picks. The other things they will do is that they will work with local authorities to sponsor bins and bin it campaigns. Then they will also identify if there are local parks or local open areas that are subject to litter problems, not necessarily McDonald's litter problems, but any litter. So all our staff are told you pick up all litter, not just that which is associated with McDonald's. And so they run regular schemes with community groups or with schools to do cleanup campaigns, and that very much depends on the local council or local amenity groups or local schools getting in touch with us and asking us to participate in that. The litter pick map is always kept as a living document because, as I said, McDonald's don't like litter either. And so that's how litter operates very generally around any store, and indeed this store. This operator has a very good reputation working with community groups in the areas that he operates restaurants. I have glowing references, which is very nice to read.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, are you content, or do you want a supplementary?
I'm content, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farquhar, do you have any questions at this moment in time?
I do, if you please, Chair, and thank you very much for the reminder that the responsibilities of the Licensing Committee is for the upholding of the licensing objective, so therefore it does have a specific purpose. And as the representation is that the operational running of a restaurant is very different to the paper submission for its application. So on that basis, just picking up on the litter picking side of things, and I'm pleased to hear that the franchisee, Tony Bennett, has 24 years experience as a franchisee and has 18 restaurants, of which 8 are licensed, and 4 of those being 24 hours. So my questions will actually base around the experience of the franchisee and what's actually delivered. If you please, Chair.
Thank you. If you could get, thank you, Mr. Sharon Beeses. I like to we have had some information with regard to Mr. Bennett. So if you could be short but concise in your response, please, to Councillor Farquhar. Thank you.
So my specific question, Chair, is that on the subject of litter picking, this is a contentious issue. I do appreciate the fact that it was pointed out that it requires an environmental officer to attend the premises to look at the rota in the submission there. Is there any mechanism whereby the rota, not dissimilar to perhaps in another restaurant or a public area where there is a rota published and it is ticked off by the cleaning, is there any way that you could actually publish for the public to see when patrols are actually done and when they're actually completed?
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Mr. Sharon-Lapidis, could you respond, please?
So our litter picks are organised internally. They operate around set times, but there is a degree of flexibility. So, for example, when a store opens around school hours, for example, there will be a spike after lunch. There'll be a spike after the school kind of home run. Those, of course, are outside the hours of licensing, so that wouldn't be appropriate. Secondly, things change. So over half term, over the summer holidays, the timings may well change. So if there are sporting events nearby and so on. So there's definitely a commitment to have regular picks throughout the day. And what happens in individual stores is a rota which is available for inspection, say to the licensing officer if they need to come by, but those kind of things are not available to the public. They're operational, but you will see our staff because. So I'm just looking at some photos that were sent to me. They're high-vis jackets with McDonald's branding, sort of in the local area. The litter bin is always branded. Our collectors are always in their uniform. Yeah, I've never been asked the question to make that available before, so I'm a little bit struck. It's certainly always available on site, and the map is always available for review by the licensing authority.
Yes, I think Councillor Farquhar would be content as long as he is assured that those responsible would be able to have view of it, which of course would be any of our statutory consultees, should they so wish. So I hope that's answered your question, Councillor Farquhar.
It has, and it is interesting, Chair, that it's never been asked, because it is about public nuisance, it is about litter, it is about a perception of how often these patrols take place. It's all very well and good to produce a photo of an individual in uniform or high vis, but there is a perception to the neighbourhoods of these 18 odd premises that this franchisee has, that perhaps the litter picking is not as often as it should be on the rota, and as it was pointed out, then obviously there's strains upon the business which may interfere with that rota. So I think the answer is that even though there is a rota, there is no actual list of when these patrols and these litter patrols are actually completed, which is viewable to the public. Is that the case, Chair?
I would imagine that Mr. Bennett would have the. I will be corrected by Mr. Sharon Mobilia, but I would imagine that any rota would be crossed off when it was so completed. You see them on the backs of loos, don't you, in Tesco, where they come along and they put a time in or a little tick. And I would imagine that was the same. And I would imagine if a licensing officer came along and there were several days incomplete, that then there would be an issue. So I think we can be assured that this is done because there's a set system for it. And let us just hope that it is so done in that way, Councillor Parker. That is helpful.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask another question, please? I see on the plan that there is a compression or a compactor for waste on the actual premises itself. So my question is around about the noise levels of said machinery that may actually cause a public nuisance, and the disposal or the emptying of bins, or the filling of bins and the collection of bins. So my question is around the noise levels and the timings which the preparation for the waste and the collection of waste is completed, if you please.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Mr. Sharon Beedis, you have the floor. Thank you.
Ma'am, yes, all our machinery, our fans and vents and so on are all always kept up to the latest environmental standards. That's in accordance with our planning and the operation. So you'll see just from the plan the way in which McDonald's seek to minimise its environmental impact, including things like the compressor and so on, but also, for example, the way in which we recycle and reuse our oil and our fat, because that's collected, it's processed and then used to fuel our fleet of vehicles, for example. In terms of the collection of that waste, it is done in conjunction with the local authorities' timing or with our contractors. So it tends to be during daylight. It's not done at night, and it's definitely not done during the hours of licensable activities.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farquhar, are you content? I think I will ask a question myself, and then I'll demur to Councillor Johnson again if you'd like to come back in, but please feel free to ask another question shortly. I was just wondering, mediation is always a very good way of moving forward any of these applications, and I was wondering whether any mediation had taken place with the one objector, because it's rather odd to have just the one objector and not to have been able to resolve it, especially as the points in case that are put forward could be construed not to be licensing issues per se. So was there any mediation? If not, why not? Well,
the reality is when we can mediate, we do. But I've been working for McDonald's cases now for a very long time, and I tend to find that many representations they don't want to speak to you. Which is a concern. We haven't reached out to this couple because the concerns are very general in nature. They're more planning concerns. They're not directly related to operational measures in respect of the operation of a restaurant like this. And Mom, to be perfectly frank, it's often the case that it's you and your colleagues which are able to frame questions relevant to the licensing objectives that makes the exercise most useful. So in one sense, this is a mediation because you're able to pick up on the factors that are most relevant.
Thank you very much. And the other question was, because the questions need asking, that the applicant feels that there will be public nuisance, and the applicant also feels that there may well be antisocial behaviour connected to that public nuisance. What are your thoughts on this risk? And if it's felt to be a risk, how is it mitigated? If it's not felt to be a risk, how would it be mitigated? and that's with regard to any ensuing antisocial behaviour that could possibly occur, and any out of that any public nuisance per se. Thank you.
On a very basic level, public nuisance and antisocial behaviour are just really bad for business. Why would anyone go to any restaurant or to any shop which is dirty, poorly staffed, attracts antisocial behaviour, unpleasant experiences? It's just not part of any restaurant experience. And so if you look to the operating schedule, you'll see there that there is full CCTV coverage. Our CCTV is able to obtain clear images of faces. We're able to identify people. We're able to identify vehicles. We're able to work with the police. Our staff are trained, so they're regularly trained in conflict management. If it arises, if you visited a McDonald's store recently, you'll see that a lot of the stores now have the counters where you effectively order yourself. Now that in itself is a huge conflict reduction, because there's no chance that you'll be able to say, no, I ordered a cheeseburger, not a hamburger. You didn't listen to me. How could you? Because you'll have tapped on your screen, you'll have had a slip which says, those are my details. We've worked out, and it's quite a horrific fact to acknowledge, that if people are being rude inside a restaurant or unfriendly, you just play classical music. And it's a really sad statement to say that classical music tends to scare people away. Or you turn off the free internet, for example. These are sort of quite small measures that relate to our experience to ensure that we don't have antisocial behaviour. As you know, we don't sell alcohol at any of our stores. We're well lit, for example, so you know that if you come into a McDonald's, you will have your face very clearly on our cameras and on our systems, including your voice in your car and your vehicle. So those are just some of the measures that we put in place, and our entire estate is constantly monitored for better and better and better improvement. I mentioned earlier that I'd never been asked about the
Rota.
The rota, along with other things that I'd never been asked before. I was asked about seagulls recently, which just sort of took me, blindsided me. But there again, of course, that particular store was able to then think about the way its bins are constructed, where they're located, and so on. So it's a constantly evolving risk-assessed environment to ensure that we have safe, attractive restaurants, because McDonald's are genuinely committed to their local communities. And if you don't believe that and just want to be very cynical about it, they're attracted to the bottom line, which means that it's just bad for business.
Okay, I'm not sure that our classicists would be too pleased at your methods, but it may be a method. I've never had that method before. It might be something that the subcommittee might be suggesting to other applicants with regard to control. And turning off the Wi-Fi seems a very good idea.
It was pioneered in Belfast by the City Council. They worked out that if you played classical music in public areas, street drinkers would be, there you go. That's just nerdy licensing background.
Yeah, quite sad as a classical music lover myself, but two very good areas of use. So thank you for that. Councillor Johnson, do you have any further questions, or are you content?
I'm content, thank you, Chair.
Lastly to you, any further questions?
I do. I have a further two, if that's acceptable, Chair.
Okay.
The first one, again, relates to public safety, because it's a wider sort of sphere, and it's interesting that you talk about the franchisee with his 24 years of experience, and that out of the 18 restaurants that he has franchised, that 4 are now 24-hour operations. My question comes in two parts. Is it a move from McDonald's that they're moving to 24-hour operations, as essentially this is requiring for the late night refreshments? And therefore, from a public safety perspective, I'd like to ask a question, if I may, Chair, around the welfare of the staff on a 24-hour model. I see there is a facility there, but I'd like to ask further questions as regards, or have a further understanding how a job and an operation that's 24 hours is providing for its staff, because our staff are obviously also members of the public. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think I can cut that through. This isn't a 24-hour application, but I think your question's well made with regard to perhaps asking about the staff and how they are cared for. But I think we couldn't consider this something which hasn't been applied for, but we can certainly answer the question, I think, about the staff. So, Mr. Sharon-Abidis, would you be able to assist, please?
Ma'am, absolutely. The way our shifts are organised is that a 24-hour operation is favoured by the staff for this reason. It means that if you're on a late shift, you'll tend to arrive at 9, 10 or 10:30, and you'll work through to just before breakfast. So it means that you're coming into work at a time when you're not having to, I don't know, say a store that closes at 11 or 12 or 1, you're not having to sort of work through the nighttime economy. You're not having to travel with night buses and so on. So you remain on site, and then you leave in the morning as part of that morning commute. So for many people, it's favoured. What many staff don't like, and where stores have difficulty, is where you close at 1, 2, 3 o'clock, because no one wants to work until those hours and then leave. So there is a huge staff incentive. It's also more efficient for staff, because during the nighttime and early morning hours, it can be quite quieter. So they're able to do maintenance and cleaning with less disturbance, less interaction, less issues from the public. And it also has an environmental benefit. Switching things on and off, heating and turning down oils and so on has an impact. So when you see sort of 24 hours, you do tend to think corporate greed. But the reality is that in terms of staff working, staff safety, and an environmental impact, 24 hours is favoured, even where it isn't making money. So there are stores where they have a 24-hour license, but it's not profitable. But the advantages to staff and to the environment are so great that it's kept open as part of operations.
Okay, it's a very useful answer, thank you. But it's good to hear that the staff are being considered with regard to not having to go home at 1 and 3 in the morning. I'm sure Councillor Farquhar and Councillor Johnson would agree there that is a good point. And your further supplementary, Councillor Farquhar, did you have another?
I did, Chair, and it relates to, and I was very pleased to hear that that McDonald's has a scheme whereby the waste oils are processed into providing fuel for their fleets. My question relates to whether or not there is any policy either from the franchisee or from McDonald's as regards the running of engines because from the plan, I anticipate this has a drive-through element to this particular location. But I'm also aware that sometimes vehicles park in car parks at McDonald's, and the food is brought to them in their vehicles. So I wanted to know if there was any policy as regards the running of engines when either queuing or waiting in the car park, and if there is any policy with McDonald's that you actually monitor your air quality in the vicinity of the premises.
Well, obviously, air quality. Sorry, Mr. Sharon-Abidis, if you just 1 moment. Air quality is not perhaps an issue for us as a licensing under the licensing objectives, but I think with regard to the noise nuisance, the running of engine question is well made. how is that mitigated? Because that would be something which would, and actually I think it's something which is touched on in our objector submission. So thank you, Mr. Sharon-Bezes. Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Good question.
Air quality, shielding of cars, and noise is covered in part by the planning. In terms of our operations,
could we concentrate on the licensing
the
and our requirements under that?
The location of the drive-through will have been considered to minimise noise impact. Screens are used. There are buffers. There are generally signs around idling and what to do in the car park, and there is planting that is used there. But we are authorised to be a drive-through, so there will be a lawful impact of that. The trick is to make sure, of course, that it isn't. So some of the features that go towards reducing that impact will, for example, include things like covered lighting, so the lighting shines down rather than up, the ability to control the volume on the tannoys and the speakers, and what you do at the windows. All of those are covered through signage and engagement.
Okay. Of course, the answer, I suppose, would be if everybody had electric cars, we wouldn't have the noise, but we're not there yet. So thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for that last question. Councillor Johnson, are you content? Yes?
Yes, Chair, I am.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll just ask then, thank you very much for answering all those questions, Ms. Sharon-Bezes. We're very grateful. Just going to ask now our licensing officer, Mrs. Rogers, if she has any questions for you. Mrs. Rogers?
No, I don't, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're now on to our other persons or our objectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to endeavour to find their submission on my computer, which I've just got here. And I'm just going to read this out for public record so people are aware of what the objection is. I won't read their names. They're not redacted, but I won't read them in any essence. So it says I'm speaking on behalf of the other persons, or not on their behalf, but so that they are heard. So to whom it may concern, in response to the above request by McDonald's restaurants, I wish to register most strongly our objections to this. The proposed extended opening times is totally inappropriate in an area which has a significant number of residential properties in close proximity. The increased risk of resulting antisocial behaviour such opening would no doubt encourage is also a negative factor. Increased level of noise is a probable outcome from traffic, nighttime customers and the antisocial behaviour that would ensue. The environmental impact from resulting rubbish and traffic is unwelcome. Increasing opening hours would be detrimental to the general character and living conditions for nearby residents, which is not of relevance. And if the council agree to this, it is so obvious that the emphasis is on business profit margins and not for the taxpayers who in good faith pay their council tax in the belief that their council will give due consideration to the quality of their lives and the environment where they live. Obviously, fiscal profit is also not a remit of this committee. And it goes on to say, please, in all fairness to local residents, refuse this request for these extended hours, reference, etc. So that is the submission from the objector. Now, the difficulty is here that we would have our objector usually in front of us and we'd be able to ask questions of them. But I feel that the subcommittee has, in questioning the applicant, covered all aspects of the submission, and I hope we're able to draw inference from that as to our final decision. So there's nothing really other I can do than just read out the submission and move on. So we have no questions, obviously, from Mr. Sharon-Bezes as the applicant, and there are no questions from Mrs. Rogers because sadly there's nobody to answer them. So that said, we will move on now, if everybody is content, and we will give an opportunity to sum up. Mrs. McNamara, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I think you covered it anyway, but I think just for openness, that just so that you're aware, not all the references in that submission relate to the licensing objectives. I think you covered it, but I think we just, for transparency and clarity, we just need to make that clear that you as a subcommittee can only consider those that refer to the licensing objectives.
Yes, I tried to point those out as we went through, but thank you for that reference, Mrs. McNamara. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll now demur to Mr. Sharon Lambides, your opportunity to sum up. Thank you. You have the floor.
Ma'am, thank you. Thank you for the questions. They were really helpful and focused. The reality is there is no criticism of the operating schedule, and so I will commend the application to you. And as you no doubt know, your licensing officers and other responsible authorities keep a watch on these types of premises. And if there are issues, there will be reviews and applications. So I commend the application to you with that safeguard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Rogers, did you have anything in summary? Thank you.
No, I didn't. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So the hearing is now concluded, and our subcommittee will adjourn in private with our legal advisor and our clerk to deliberate. A notification of subcommittee decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with our regulations, which is today, February 1st, 2023. And the notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I'll ask our legal advisor, Mrs. McNamara, if she'd kindly explain the right of appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There will be a right of appeal against a appeal period starts 21 days from notice in writing, and it's to the Magistrates' Court.
Thank you very much. So I just finish then with thanking you, Mr. Sharon Lambides, for attending today, and your team, and to the officers and to our councillors. And with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much and good morning.